everyone, my name is Omalola. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I usually like to take you guys along with me while I travel the world. This is a little bit of a different video. My next video is going to go back to my usual format of sharing travel vlogs, so definitely go onto my page if you've missed those. YouTube hasn't been doing a great job at promoting them, and I also have a really small channel, and so definitely check out my travel vlogs in my last videos, and my next video is going to be another travel vlog. So like and subscribe if you like that kind of content. I actually started this year. So far I've been able to visit 6 countries this year alone, and I'm about to visit my 7th tomorrow. I visited 2 of those countries twice. So I applied for a visa a total of 9 times and I got approved 9 times. And so during that process, I learned a thing or two that I feel would be helpful for other people who are looking to travel the world and have a Nigerian passport. And I have a Nigerian passport, I didn't mention, but I'm Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria. Right now, I'm living in Bangkok, Thailand for a little bit. It's a whole story. You have to go on my page to catch up, but that's where I'm at right now. And this is my Nigerian passport. And with this passport, I've been able to travel to a lot of places. No visa rejections yet, knock on wood. And so I think I have a thing or two to share about my experience traveling as a Nigerian, and also how it is I'm able to get all these visas. Yeah, this is one of the lowest ranked passports in the world. And so if I'm able to travel with this, I think I have a tip or two that I can teach other people on how to make sure that they get their visas, and also maybe calm some of the anxieties that we tend to have when we're trying to travel, hopefully. Growing up in Nigeria, visa rejections were pretty common, and people would stress a lot whenever they had to travel because they were always scared that they would get rejected, and oftentimes they would. But what I found, and my feeling, is that a huge part of that is we're not really armed with a lot of the information that we need to be successful during the processes. Hopefully at the end of this conversation, you'll learn a thing or two about what it is that visa offices are looking for and how you can work on your next visa application to hopefully be successful and achieve your dreams of traveling the world. Maybe if you're not Nigerian and you have a Nigerian friend or a Nigerian wife or a Nigerian girlfriend or boyfriend, send this video to them if they're thinking of traveling and often feel discouraged. Or if you don't know anyone Nigerian, you have a little bit of an insight into what the experience is like traveling with a weaker passport versus a stronger one. My husband has an American passport, and so I can give you a little bit of a comparison between my experiences and his experiences when we've wanted to travel. I even saw someone on YouTube, and if I find his video, I'll put that up here, where he ended up purchasing citizenship to another country simply for their passport so he can travel more freely. And so this is actually an issue that a lot of Nigerians have been struggling with for a while. So let me start with the basics, right? This is generally what you'll need in order to get a visa. And some places, a lot of places will ask for a few additional information, but this is really where you want to start with. So there are 3 main things, and the third is even just like is optional sometimes. Sometimes they ask for it, sometimes they don't. So the 3 things are, number 1, you need accommodation, right? You need to be able to prove that you have somewhere to stay for the duration of your time. So typically when you book a hotel, you have the PDF. I would just save that file in a document, and that's typically what you will present to the visa officers. The second thing that you need to apply for a visa is flights to and from. Like, that's your return ticket, right? You need to show that you have a flight to the location and a flight back to Nigeria, or wherever it is you are living in currently. Finally, sometimes they ask for this, sometimes they don't, is a bank statement. For the bank statement, it just proves that you have the financial capability to support yourself during your stay in the country for the few days that you want to stay or the month that you want to stay. But they look at the amount that's in your account to make sure that you're not going to end up on the streets of their country destitute, essentially. And the last obvious one is a visa fee, right? You need to pay for the visa application. So a lot of people who get rejected, it typically comes down to one of those 3. I think as Nigerians, sometimes we can underestimate how much a holiday actually costs. Your account balance could be looking really, really good in Naira, but once they make that conversion into their currency and they understand how much food costs, how much transportation costs, I think they can usually tell whether or not you can actually afford this holiday. And so I would really encourage us to do the conversions, learn about how much things cost, and really just accept that hard truth. There's a lot of like mysticism surrounding visa applications, and no one's saying you shouldn't pray, but it doesn't come down to just prayer. Some countries will even tell you that you need to have this amount of dollars in your bank account in order to receive a visa, because that shows that you can support yourself. So that is definitely something to think about a little bit more while you're applying for your visa. Oh, so I have a quick story to illustrate this. Hopefully I don't get too far off topic, but I remember when I was applying for my US visa, and I lived in the US for about 10 years. Currently I'm living in Thailand, so hold me responsible. But while I was applying for my US student visa, because the way it worked back then in Lagos, everyone would walk up to a window and you can hear their visa interviews. And so you hear people get rejected essentially, and it's a whole drama in that US consulate office. It was such a drama. So this man walked up to the window and he wanted to travel to the US with his 3 children for a visit. Makes sense, right? And so the officer is asking him, hey, so what do you want to do in the US? And so he says he wants to take his kids to Disneyland. Awesome, right? And then the next question he's asked is, how long are you going to be in Disneyland? This man said 3 months. So of course he was denied his visa. So these are the things that people say or people do at the visa office that cause them to get rejected. If you know anything, if you've done even the littlest bit of research about Disneyland, you know that people are not staying there for 3 months. I don't think people even stay there for 2 weeks. I don't think that's the thing. And the amount of money that would cost is not even like, these are just not reasonable or viable plans that show that you really know what you're doing. So that just told me that we have a little bit of learning to do when it comes to visa applications, what is required, and hopefully at the end of this video you have a clear idea as to what that looks like. And even if you have all of that, the actual process for getting a visa in a lot of places, especially if they don't typically process a lot of visas, the processes are just hard. The processes can just be difficult, not make any sense. They haven't been updated because not that many people may apply for visas from your particular country. I'll talk a little bit about all the 7 countries that I've gotten my visas for and what that experience was like as a Nigerian. And I'll talk a little bit about what that experience was like as my husband, who also traveled with me to a lot of these places. So when I talk about the visa processes being challenging or not super easy to understand, a good example that I'll give for this is a Thai visa. Sherpa is a really good website, but it didn't really present me with complete information when it came to applying as a Nigerian. So what it told me was that as a Nigerian applying, I have to get a paper visa from an embassy. But what I found when doing the research myself is that I didn't need that. If I was a Nigerian in Nigeria, I needed a paper visa. But if I was a Nigerian in a country like the US, I was able to apply online just like other people in the US can apply online. And so it's very rare that those specific nuances are made known to everybody and that you know exactly what's going to work or what process is going to work for your particular situation. And so I ended up having to go to the official e-visa Thai site. I had to put in my country and exactly where I live to know for sure. Luckily, the Thai visa has this available. A lot of places do not have this available, and so you have to call, and I'm going to get into all of that later. That's kind of what it is it's not super clear what the process is going to be. So it can take time sometimes to come across the correct information, and sometimes what you see online is incorrect, or sometimes it's outdated. Like certain things or certain laws change, and maybe the article that you came across on the immigration website is from 2022 and they've changed the policy, but they didn't update the and so it can just prove a little more challenging than I think it needs to be. And so if you don't have that issue, like if you're my husband with a US passport, you wouldn't even have to navigate all that. You just show up and you're allowed into the country. So since we're on the topic, let's talk a little bit about Thailand. After I applied for the visa online, I then get an email from the visa office asking for additional documents. So the additional information that they needed, I think it was like employment verification. They needed a police clearance letter, which it sounds like it's a big deal. For me, it just ended up being driving for about 15 minutes. You put in your social security number. They pretty much email you a letter from the police saying you're innocent of all crimes. And so that process was not too hard. It wasn't too difficult. And during the process, I think some people could perceive this as maybe it's a little unfair or it's too much of a hassle just to travel. But I think I'm able to like ground myself during those moments by remembering that being able to travel is such a privileged position to be in. And so Nigerian or not, this is still something that most majority people on this earth are not going to be able to experience. Like, oh my gosh, I've been able to see so many fascinating and amazing cultures and learn so much about human beings. And if all I had to do, especially in the case of Thailand, was just go and get a police clearance letter, and I used the same letter for more than one visa, I think I can do that. And so I was able to apply online for my Thai visa. I got it. If I was applying in Nigeria, I would have had to physically go to the Thai embassy and go through all that process. And I don't know how long the processing time would have been. It just would have been more challenging for sure. And the embassy is in Abuja. I don't live in Abuja when I'm in Nigeria. I live in Lagos. And so it would have to be a whole like weekend trip, which is obviously not as easy as my husband, who would just have to hop on a plane and show up in Thailand. So that's an example of the unique situation that I had to encounter as a Nigerian. Not too bad, right? It's not scary. You'll be fine if you just follow instructions. But I think people get too intimidated and they get quite anxious, and so it's hard for them to just focus on whatever it is that's needed, or they mystify it. And like I was saying, the process changes a lot. So now I don't think Nigerians have to submit a letter from the NDLEA, which is like a drug administrative whatever. But then, and I think they only stopped that maybe this year, we had to submit a letter from the NDLEA. And if you're a married woman, you have to get a letter from your husband saying that you're allowed to travel. Oh, okay, I think they've stopped that. They've stopped that. I think I'll put the article here where they've stopped it. But yeah, there was a time not too long ago where if I wanted to travel, I had to get a letter from my husband. I had to get a letter from someone else who is claiming responsibility for all the drug-related offenses that I do. You know, it's a whole thing if you're a Nigerian in Nigeria, and it's a completely different process. And I don't even know if the NDLEA is involved anymore in the visa processes. I hope they're not. So the last thing that was a difference between my experience and my husband's experience in getting a Thai visa was Nigerians were not allowed to book Airbnbs. I don't know if other countries were in this category, but I had to book a hotel. And so luckily, you know, it hadn't been too long since I booked the Airbnb when we first traveled. And that would have been less expensive than having to book a hotel in every single one of those locations. So that is definitely one downside, is in Thailand, if you're applying for a visa in Thailand, you're restricted to an Airbnb if you're from Nigeria, but I didn't have that experience anywhere else. So, but after all of that, we were able to get a visa and it was fine. So yeah, just for the Thai visa, I'll try to put like a little table here. Here are the differences between a Nigerian citizen and a US citizen. And so it's obviously a little bit more work, or maybe a lot more work, I don't know, to travel as a Nigerian versus a US person. But honestly, that is one of the worst cases of this disparity. Other situations, sometimes we have to go through the same things, or it's not even that much of a difference. And even then, I don't think it was that hard to figure out, and it was very much worth the experience of visiting Thailand to go through all of that. And the application actually took about a week to process this time, but the second time that I applied, the application took 3 days to process. Okay, so I'll go over very quickly other countries that I've visited this year and what my experience has been. So up next, after Thailand, I visited Vietnam, and that process was very simple. You know, the 3 things that I talked about at the beginning, they asked for a flight ticket and they asked for my accommodation, and they didn't ask for a bank account or like a bank statement specifically, but they actually asked you to estimate how much you think your holiday is going to cost you. And I think that is a good way to check that people actually know what they're doing, like that they know this is how much food costs, this is how to get from place to place. And so I was able to put in how much I thought it would cost. And my Vietnamese visa I got again within 3 days, and I've been to Vietnam twice, and so I got that visa twice within 3 days. It's not so hard and it's not bad for Nigerians. And my husband had to do the same process. My husband, as an American, you need a visa to enter Vietnam. All right, up next is Japan. So Japan is even hard to visit for some countries even in Asia, and I was able to get a visa as a Nigerian, and so I will give you just like the few tips that I have about getting a visa to Japan. So you have the usual that you have to give: flights, accommodation, bank statement. Japan is a little bit different because they also ask for a detailed itinerary of your trip. And I believe they don't request a visa fee unless you are approved for the visa, which is really cool and very classy of them, because I think that's part of it, is you don't want to lose your visa fee, right? But if you apply to Japan, typically they'll review your documents before requesting the visa fee. So the itinerary was a little bit challenging because applying for the visa is usually the first thing I do, and sometimes I'm still making plans like a few days until I leave. Sometimes I'm heading out the day of and coming up with plans on the same day. And so I was like, how can these people expect me to give a detailed itinerary? So they actually sent me back to write this itinerary again 2 to 3 times before they finally approved my visa. So they actually sent back my itinerary 2 to 3 times. I think it was, they actually sent back my itinerary 2 to 3 times before they finally accepted it and approved my visa. But each time it was just because I really didn't know very much about Tokyo. And I wrote things like food tour of Tokyo, and they were like, you need to be specific. And I thought they were being assholes, but once I showed up in Tokyo, I understood exactly why they needed me to be that specific. I understood why they needed me to be that specific. And it's because Tokyo is like 10-15 cities in one. Like, you can stay in one area for a week and still never run out of things to do. And so if you say a food tour of Tokyo or a walking tour of Tokyo, you sound absolutely crazy. And so I had to rewrite everything and be specific, like, okay, I have a food tour in the Asakusa area, and so that was when it was accepted. But during that process, it just seemed like they wanted to gauge how much you understood where you're going to and how much you planned where you're going to. But of course, you only make a lot of those plans closer to the actual leaving dates, and you typically apply for a visa a month in advance, and so I didn't have those plans ready. And so I was able to look at that a little bit and actually start to come to terms with like, oh wow, this city might be a lot bigger than I initially thought it was. And it was also really helpful for me planning. And I sent that in, and after sending them my documents, the Japanese visa took 1 week to process, which was awesome. And I had my visa to Japan. I went to Japan. I had the best time. Check out my vlogs in Japan if you like travel vlogs. So the next visa I'll talk about was my Malaysian visa. I actually came back from Malaysia about a month ago, and my experience in Malaysia was really, really fun. I had a great time. My Malaysian visa experience, it was easy. As a Nigerian, you can apply online. Just like Vietnamese visa, you can also apply online. Japanese visa, you can also apply online. The only issue really with my Malaysian visa, oddly enough, was the passport upload. I would upload the digital version of the passport, and they would respond and say, oh no, we need a scanned passport. And I'd be like, okay. I'd scan the passport and send it back in, and they'd say, oh no, we need a digital version. And so I did that like back and forth maybe like 5 or 6 times during the process of applying to for that visa. And I don't even know what happened. I know that the picture that I uploaded the last time was the picture that I uploaded the time before the last, but it finally got approved. And so I was able to go to Malaysia. But that was the only hiccup. Outside of that, it was a pretty straightforward visa to apply to. So the Colombian visa as well, I was able to apply completely online. It was an easy process. The only challenge was the application was entirely in Spanish, and I don't remember there being an option to change the language. And so that made the process maybe a little bit less accessible, but I was able to translate it on Google Chrome. And that process took about 2 weeks, and I got a bit nervous because I actually applied for that visa less than 3 weeks before I was going to go. And so it was nice that I was able to get my visa on time. So that's the number one tip that I can give you, is trying to apply for these visas at least a month in advance. And so if there's anything extra that they need from you because you're Nigerian, you have enough time to provide that to them. And you're not worried and concerned that you're going to miss out on your hotel reservations and all of your plans simply because of visas. So after I went to Colombia, I also went to Peru, and the Peru visa, I completely understood why it was as challenging as it was. They just don't have that many Nigerian citizens visiting Peru. And so like I would email them, and the process was weird. I would email them all of the information I had, and in order to get a response, I had to email maybe like 6-7 consulates at the same time, because the person I started emailing with, he stopped responding. It was just really, really challenging. And so finally, when I sent in all of my documents to the right email, I just got one email that said, "You're approved," kind of just like in a text. It ended up being a paper visa. I showed up and I paid, and I was able to get a paper visa the same day, which was really nice. A lot of the time, visa offices, they don't answer their phone. And so sometimes I would even get like wrong information because the person on the phone hasn't even looked at what is on their website for visa applicants, because a lot of the people that typically visit Peru are from the United States or other South American countries where they don't need visas to enter Peru. And so some of these visa application processes are kind of abandoned. Like, I don't think they care too much to like review them. And so it can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes getting exactly what the process is. And another challenge with Peru was that they asked for a document that I didn't have, and I wasn't qualified to have because of my immigration status in the US. But they said that was a requirement, and so I had to screenshot a page from the USCIS website explaining why my particular situation, I can't get this document, and I reassured them that I would still be able to re-enter the US because I traveled out before. But after I was able to like reassure them and send them the articles with the USCIS, that was when they finally granted my visa. A lot of the time you're dealing with individuals, and usually if you can email somebody and communicate with someone, you're able to resolve whatever challenges. It's not such a mysterious and mystical process if you can just talk to someone, and typically they're trying to help you out, especially when I think back to Japan. It didn't feel like they were trying to, get me or anything. They do want you to visit their countries. They do want you to visit their countries legally. They want you to spend money in their countries. They also want to understand that you are responsible as an adult for your own accommodation, for taking care of yourself, and that you're not going to be a nuisance. And so the final visa that I will talk about is actually the place that I'm going tomorrow. I'm going to Cambodia tomorrow for the first time, and my Cambodian visa was interesting. So online, I go to the online e-visa website, and as I'm filling in everything, I go to select my country, and this is what I see. Looking back, it was not funny then, but it's really, really funny to think about. The fact that like Nigeria just doesn't exist. And so I look online and it says that Nigerians maybe can get visas to Cambodia. And so I'm like, okay, let me go to the visa office in person. And normally this would have intimidated me, and it did feel a little bit intimidating, but it's better to have an answer than to just be scared and not do anything. At first he was like, oh, we don't do tourist visas. I'm like, oh shit. So he explained to me that there's an app, and if I apply on the app, I'm able to select Nigeria. But for whatever reason, I cannot select Nigeria on the laptop. But on the app, it was super easy. I got approved within 2 days, and one of those days was a weekend, which was interesting because I even put the wrong last name. But that was a mistake I made. Because my last name is a compound last name, there's a hyphen. And so once my phone scanned my passport and put it into the system, it missed out the first half. And so I'd already uploaded the application. But once you're able to get a hold of someone via email, you'd be surprised by how helpful people are, especially if you're traveling in Asia. A lot of these people have a culture of respect, and they're just very well-behaved people. It was a very easy process fixing my name on the visa application, and now I have a visa to Cambodia, and tomorrow I'm going to travel to Cambodia for the first time. And Cambodia didn't even ask for my bank statement, now that I think about it. All they wanted was my hotel and my flights. That's really all they wanted, and I was able to get my visa rather easily. And my husband as well applied for a Cambodian visa online, and he used the e-portal online, and he was able to get his Cambodian visa. Another way of looking at this is you are, as a Nigerian, having to go through everything that you go through in order to get a visa. It's really, really hard to then go there and find yourself destitute in a foreign country. And I see it here sometimes. I told you I lived in Thailand. There are a lot of, not a lot, it's not crazy, but it's very rare to see a Thai person who is homeless, right? It's very rare and you don't really see it. But in Bangkok, I've seen a number of Westerners who are homeless. In Vietnam, I saw a number of Westerners who were panhandling for money because nobody checked. You know, and that's really funny to think about as a Nigerian, because I can't imagine entering a place without a visa. That's just not a reality for me. But the fact that there are people who, they enter the country, nobody checks if they have a place to stay, nobody checks if they have a flight out. They just assume that they have the money to take care of themselves. And they get here, and I've seen a lot more Westerners end up being just like homeless, you know, people, the locals have to take care of them. But I don't see that happen with Nigerians. I don't see that happen with Africans, because typically there's a lot of hurdles that we have to go through, and you're not showing up somewhere without a ticket out. You're not showing up somewhere without a place to live. A lot of the time you can't even show up without showing your bank account that you can take care of yourself. So sometimes that kind of saves you such a crazy mistake, because it just seems like a miscalculation that somebody probably had in their life, but you don't have the ability to miscalculate in that way as a Nigerian. So that's another way of looking at it. And the unfortunate truth and reality about why it is Nigerians have such a hard time entering countries visa-free is a lot of them have had negative experiences with Nigerians. Take Malaysia, for example. There's just been a lot of Nigerians, too many. A disproportionate amount of Nigerians have committed crimes in a lot of these places, and some of the places where these crimes are committed, it's a huge taboo. Like in a lot of Southeast Asian countries, drugs are a huge taboo. Even in Thailand, where weed is legal, you still would be hard pressed to find a Thai person who like actively smokes weed like that. That's just not their thing. And so it looks really bad on Nigerians if you come all the way from Africa. You know, you come all the way from Africa to sell drugs to these people. And some of these places, if you think about Vietnam, they have had drugs purposely infused into their societies by colonists to destroy them. And so they have very, very strong policies and very, very strong feelings about drugs. And so, unfortunately, some of these places, Nigerians have shown up and distributed drugs. Because of the negative reputation that we have to deal with, that's where a lot of these restrictions come from. You know, as much as these idiots don't have anything to do with me as a law-abiding Nigerian, people are people, and there's often the idea and the opinion of Nigerians being criminal. And I'm not saying this to scare you. I think sometimes we feel like people are saying things to discourage us, but no, I will absolutely recommend that you travel. But I really want you to be aware of this perception that people have of us, and not that us as individuals should take responsibility for that perception. Maybe it's a conversation we need to have with ourselves about why it is there are so many Black nations. You know, so this isn't a racist thing where they can travel to so many places visa-free, but people seem to be so afraid of having Nigerians come into their country. And it's a heartbreaking truth to confront, because Nigerians are very proud people, and there is a lot to be proud of. We have an amazing aspects of our culture. We have very well accomplished people. And even if sometimes I do honestly feel quite scared about how I would be perceived if people know that I'm Nigerian, I assure you that a lot of the places that you actually want to visit, people are not that judgmental. And I think knowing this, that just tells you that you absolutely need to go to these places and be a good representation of your culture and of your people. Don't let fear of being perceived stop you from traveling, especially as a Nigerian. And I think it makes it more necessary for you to go out and represent our country in a more positive way. I wish you all the best with your visa applications. and I wish you all the best with your travels. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. If you like travel content, if you want to travel, definitely subscribe to my channel. I typically post a lot of travel vlogs. That's really what I enjoy doing. But if you like this video, and you have any more questions for me, definitely put the questions, you know, in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them, or I'll make another video talking about maybe aspects of travel that you might be interested in. I don't know, I'm new to this whole YouTube thing, and so I'm trying to come up with what my content is going to be, and I really do enjoy talking about travel, and so it was really nice when I came up with this idea to talk about what it's like as a Nigerian who's traveling. I could even do like an update on my life in Bangkok. I've been living in Thailand now for 3 months, and it's been quite the interesting experience, and so I can share a little bit about that and maybe do a vlog of my life in Bangkok. I don't know. Let me know what you want to see in the comments. Hopefully this video reaches the right people. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!